As you know, yes, now you have to accept that you're being recorded. So as you know, the State Fair is just around the corner, and we have a few things that pertain to that. So we have a State Fair display that's in the process of being created, and the committee on that is really excited about it. And from what I've heard, it sounds like it's going to be really impressive, but we could use your help. So if you go on over to the CCBA website, from the very front page, you'll see that there's a link where you can sign up to allow them to borrow some of your items for beekeeping for the display. You'll get them back when it's done, and they need it no later than September 20th. And they're still really in need of people, living, breathing people, to come and help them with the construction of the display. There's currently only 3 active members of that committee. So if you have any extra time, and probably even things you could potentially do remotely, you can contact Myra, whose telephone number you'll find through that same link from the front of the website to the to where you would donate the sweepstakes items. And then, and another note about the State Fair, the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association will be running their honey sales booth. And you will probably get tired of seeing my emails trying to recruit people for the booth. But they're doing it actually a little bit differently this year. So we don't actually have to sign up for a whole day. There's a link that you can sign up for whatever day you'd like to do it on. And it makes it a lot easier, because then we don't have to herd cats together to try to get our schedules to align. But if you can help out with that and you feel comfortable with it, go ahead, you can email me back, and you probably saw my emails come through. And then the last announcement that I have before we get to our feature presentation is there is a field day at the Four Seas Community College this Saturday at 9 a.m. And I've been to a few of them, not nearly as many as I would like to have, but I've always learned a ton of information every time I've gone. So whether you're a new beekeeper or a seasoned beekeeper, I absolutely encourage you to come to that. So with all those announcements out of the way, wait, does anybody else have any announcements they need to make? All right. So with that out of the way, on to our feature presentation. So I am thrilled to announce that Phil Uptmor is going to be presenting on integrated pest management this evening. He started his beekeeping journey back in 2015, and he's served on the CCBA board, both as a vice president and as a president. And he's currently a journeyman beekeeper with North Carolina State Beekeepers Association. And he has about 30 colonies that he wrangles throughout Chatham County. So with that, I will turn it over to Phil. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Absolutely. You want to give me like co-host abilities?
I would love to do that, but James has to, because he's running the show.
Got it. As long as somebody does. Let's see. Come on. There we go. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now. Let me see. I've got this little pop-up window here. Go away. Trying to hide that somewhere. Okay. All right, so it looks like that's hidden now. All right, so one of the things that we always hear as especially new beekeepers is you hear about integrated pest management, and it's one of these terms that I think people use kind of loosely because it can mean quite a few things. But what I wanted to do is kind of talk about integrated pest management as it pertains to varroa mites, because I don't want to talk about, you know, varroa control and as it pertains to chemical treatments, or even you know, varroa control only using natural treatments. So there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, if you will. There are people that don't want to do any chemical treatments at all, and that's fine. And there are other people that are have no problem putting a synthetic chemical treatment on their hives. But what I want to talk about is kind of like look at more of a flow chart of what we should do and when we should do it. So if you look at the Honeybee Health Coalition's website, they have this statement, and basically since about, I think 89 is around the time frame when the varroa mite made their way to North America. All the colonies, all the honeybees in North America are susceptible to getting the varroa mite in the colony. And so this right now, this is the one aspect of beekeeping that's made things very difficult. And it seems like over the last 30 or so years, there's been several periods of time where it made beekeeping very difficult. You had the tracheal mite, for example, in the 80s, and so that also played a big part in the maintenance and whatnot of honeybees. So anyway, the varroa mite right now is our Achilles heel, or the honeybees' Achilles heel. So what are varroa and where they come from? So the varroa mite actually comes from Asia, and so they basically evolved with Apis cerana, which is more of an Asian honeybee. And so over time, as honeybees started becoming more domesticated and shipping from country to country, the spread of the varroa mite from Asia to other countries slowly started occurring. So in like 1959, 1960, they found them in China, and then like 1987, they were found in North America. The only continent where there are no varroa mites currently is Australia, but pretty much everywhere else in the world, you have varroa mites. So again, these originated and evolved with the Apis cerana, and the reason why the Apis cerana deals with these a little bit better is because they have a shorter egg to immersion or eclosure time frame. So they're not affected as much as the Western honeybee or Apis mellifera, but anyway, so they have the same problem over in Asia. It's just because of the brood cycle of Apis cerana, it's not as great. So there are two different phases of the varroa mite. You have the phoretic and the reproductive phase. And varroa mites can live in the phoretic phase. So basically that's them actually living on honeybees. They can live for months. And at the beginning of the reproductive phase, the mother or the foundress mite will move into a brood cell just prior to the capping of that brood cell. She covers herself with the brood food with only her breathing tubes exposed. And then once the capping occurs, the mother mite will go and she'll puncture the host fat body, or she'll start feeding on the host fat body, and this is going to be the same location where her daughter's son will go in, and they'll start feeding on that from that same location. So because they can't actually penetrate the host skin. So about 70 hours after the cell is capped and the foundress mite has laid her first egg, which is always a male, only one male egg is laid. So this all occurs within a 70-hour window. So it's the cell's capped. She will lay her first egg, and about at 30-hour intervals after that, she's going to start laying fertilized eggs. So just like in honeybees, she's going to start producing daughters at these 30-hour intervals. So in a varroa, the mother life cycle, she can lay anywhere from 1.5 to about 3 daughters per reproductive cycle, depending on if it's a worker brood or a drone brood. And one interesting thing with the difference between Apis cerana or Apis mellifera is the varroa only infect drone brood on Apis cerana, whereas because of the longer brood cycle on Apis mellifera, the varroa will infect both the drone and worker brood. So that's the biggest difference between the two is that the drone and worker brood are infected on Apis mellifera. So this is a nice little kind of graph showing, what happens. So here you have the queen. She's laying her egg, and then the phoretic mite, the mother mite, moves into the cell, and when it gets capped, she will attach herself to the larva, and then she will start laying eggs, and that's when we get the her son, and potentially up to 2 or 3 daughters. So one of the things that we've thought, or the scientists have thought for many years now, is that the varroa mite feeds on hemolymph, or basically the blood of the honeybee. And it wasn't until really a couple of years ago, Dr. Samuel Ramsey determined or found that the varroa mite actually feeds on the fat bodies of honeybees. And the fat bodies of the honeybee is kind of like the liver in mammals. And so this is one of the reasons why you have so many diseases and whatnot that are transmitted from the varroa to the honeybee, is because they're attacking this very important organ in the honeybee. So right now we know of at least 5 different diseases that varroa will transmit or vector, and one of the biggest ones is deformed wing virus. And I'm not saying it's the biggest one, but it is a big virus, and the advantage of this is that you can actually see it affecting your colony. Most of the diseases you won't be able to see the effect that you see the effect it has on the colony, but you can actually see it kind of in real time. One thing I will mention is that Samuel Ramsey is working on the next threat, which is the tropolalaps mite. And so before COVID hit, he was doing a lot of research on this in Thailand, and then he obviously had to come back to the U.S. But anyway, so there is a lot of research going into this mite that's been found. And if this hits the U.S., it's really going to be devastating to beekeepers and the beekeeping industry. So what do varroa do to honeybees? So again, they will puncture the fat body, and it's usually on the bottom dorsal side of the honey, on their abdomen. So these red areas are where they're going to most commonly puncture the honeybee. And so a lot of people will say, my colony's declining. I'm not seeing as many honeybees. There's something going on, and I can't figure out what the deal is. And so, in these types of forums, usually the first question is what's your mite count? And I know that new beekeepers probably get frustrated by the question, what's your mite count? But typically, probably I'd say 8 times out of 10, whatever problem you're having in your colony is probably being caused by the varroa mite. And so if you don't do a mite count, you cannot see the varroa mites on the abdomens of these honeybees, unless you have just a really high resolution camera, and you're maybe at some point in time there will be some sort of AI that will allow us to be able to see them on honeybees a little bit more easily. But for right now, you cannot. It's very difficult to see the varroa mites on the honeybees, and by the time you do see these, it's the varroa infestations going to be quite high. When are varroa the worst in the year? So I'm sure that most of you have seen this the seasonal phases of honeybees. So we have the springtime where we have the population increase. Then we have the population peak. This would be around probably May, June timeframe, and then you have the population decrease of the honeybees. So right now we're kind of in the downhill slide of the population peak. So what we have to look out for is the varroa mites. They're a little bit later, so their population increase doesn't occur until sometime in the fall. So if you don't get a grip on the varroa mites early on enough, then this population increase of varroa mites can really destroy your colony. So this is, again, something that you need to be aware of and you need to be checking on a routine basis. So what are some of the signs of varroa in your colony? Well, if a lot of the telltale signs you'll have is a weakened colony. So if you open up that colony and there are fewer bees, that would be an indication that that there is an issue of varroa. Or if you have something like this where it's a very spotty brood pattern, that would be another indication that there's a problem. Dead bees, dying bees, dead brood, bees with shriveled wings. So there's a lot of different signs that you may have a varroa problem in your colony. So deformed wing virus, like I said, is kind of an easy tell because you will see bees walking around and they have these little shriveled wings. And so if you see something like this is going to be an indication that you have that there is disease going on in your colony. And specifically here, you have deformed wing virus. So how do you detect varroa? So there are two reliable and reproducible methods. I will say that both of these methods work very well when used correctly. Okay, so I typically use an alcohol wash, but you can use the sugar shake, and as long as you do it correctly, you will get very similar results. So how do I check for varroa? So what I do is I look for the queen first and try to find the queen. Sometimes it's not always possible, but if I can find her, then I will set that frame aside. If I can't find her, then I will look at the frame I'm using and make sure that there are no that the queen's not on it, or at least attempt to make sure she's not on it. Now, if you don't know who Randy Oliver is, so Randy Oliver runs a website called Scientific Beekeeping. So he's, I believe he's like a commercial beekeeper. That's his background, but he created this website really to kind of put more of a scientific spin on things. So you'll see things on like YouTube or Facebook or other social media, and somebody will say, oh, well, if you use this X method, then that works for me all the time to get rid of varroa, and I do it twice a year. And so what Randy Oliver will do is he'll test these claims, these methods, and then he'll publish or put on his website whether or not these methods work. And these vary anywhere from like powdered sugar dusting, or the essential oil, the mineral oil vaporization and whatnot. So there's a lot of things that people talk about on social media that may work where they are, but not necessarily where everybody's at. So anyway, So what Randy Oliver says, going back to what I started, so if you have two brood boxes, so if you have, a lower and upper brood box, he's found that taking a frame from the upper brood box towards the outside of the brood configuration will give you the most reliable result for collecting samples for varroa mites. And so usually I just look for a frame that has open and capped brood towards in the top brood box towards the outside. If you need to grab two frames, you can do that. Again, just make sure that you have no queen in there. So I typically will have my supplies. So I'll have like a white 5-gallon bucket, my half-cup measuring scoop. I use these I just got like these plastic jars off of Amazon, and so I'd fill these up with a little bit of alcohol. And so when you dump the bees, and so for the alcohol, you can use like 70% rubbing alcohol or windshield washer fluid. Randy Oliver also has talked about using a little bit of Dawn soap to kill the bees. I personally did try that, but it made so many bubbles that it was really hard for me to see anything in my count. So I don't use that. And it was probably an operator error, but anyway, that's kind of my supplies. I do have several of these varroa easy checks, and they do work well. But one of the things that Don Hopkins brought up at our last field day is he feels that the holes in the strainer here might be too small, and so the bees will clog those holes, and the varroa won't be able to get through. So anyway, that's something that we did test at the last field day, and it didn't seem to be an issue. But anyway, that's kind of how that would work. So what I normally do is I just get that frame of bees, and I will knock it into the bottom of this white bucket. And then I'll just set this bucket off to the side for a little while, and I will continue on with my inspection and make sure that that everything is going okay. And maybe I find the queen, and when I do the rest of my inspection, maybe I don't. But the bees, what will happen with the bees in this bucket is they will, the foragers fly out, but the nurse bees that are left behind, they'll kind of slowly start to walk up the sides of the bucket. So they're not flying out. And so what I could do is I can, look at the bees on the side. I could kind of knock them down to the bottom if I wanted to, just to make sure that the queen, again, is not in here, because I have had situations where a colony swarmed. I did not realize they had swarmed, and I found a new queen in the bucket that was unmarked. So anyway, so that's, for me, it's just like a fail safe to make sure that I don't get the queen in my alcohol wash. So next, so after you scoop out your half cup of bees and put them in a jar with alcohol or with your powdered sugar, then you would take that and like strain it out and look at it later is what I do, and I'll show you more of that in a second. But Lewis Cobble actually has a great video, and this is something that that I will probably try out and may start doing. But he has a great video on YouTube on his channel where he puts the bees, the half cup of bees, in a Ziploc bag. And one of the advantages of this, just like what I did when I looked in that bucket for the queen, is it gives them a chance to look in that clear bag to see if the queen was mistakenly put in the bag. So then he'll get that Ziploc bag and he'll put it in the deep freeze, kill those bees, and then he will put them in when he goes inside, like the next day or something, he will like put them in a colander, and in the kitchen sink, he'll have a clear or a white tub underneath, and he can look and see how many mites are coming through that colander. So this is a really good method and it's probably something I will try myself. But I collect all my samples from all the colonies that I'm testing in my jars with alcohol. And usually at the end of all my inspections, then I'll go up to the porch and I'll check and see how many mites I have. One of the things that I do want to point out, and I'm not sure how well this will work, but that varroa easy check, it will actually, you can put the bees in there with powdered sugar, and the strainer will actually kind of go in there upside down. So if you wanted to do a sugar shake, you can use it in that manner as well. And that was something I didn't realize until I was looking for more information on that product. But basically, this is what I normally do. So I have just like a white tub, and I will have my samples of bees in my jars, and I also have like painter's tape on the jars. So as I go through and collect all my samples, I'll just write which hive or which colony number it is on the tape, and so then I'll just dump the bees into this colander, and then I'll spray the bees with the hose and to knock any remaining mites off. And so I found that doing this, I can get a very accurate mite count. And if you wanted to count the number of bees in your sample, you could certainly do that after the fact. I don't normally do that, but if you wanted to do that, you certainly could. So as I said before, both the sugar shake and the alcohol wash provide accurate results as long as you do it correctly. I just like the alcohol washes because for me to collect a sugar shake on all my colonies, I would have to stop what I'm doing to do that sugar shake. I can't, for the workflow of it, just doesn't make any sense for me. Also be aware that your sugar shake is going to be subject to the humidity. So it's like if it's really hot and humid, your powdered sugar will clump, and it's not going to be as effective. So there's also, if you haven't done a mite check yet, there is an app from the Bee Informed Partnership. It's called Mite Check. And so if you just need to figure out, maybe you've never done an alcohol wash and you want to learn how to do that, but you don't, you haven't come to a field day to do this, then you can download this app, and it'll walk you through how to do a sugar shake. It'll walk you through how to do an alcohol wash. It's a really nice app for beekeepers that want to learn how to do mite checks. So now that you have your dead bees in a colander or in your that cup for the from Pharma, or you have a half cup of ghost bees, which a half cup of bees is about 300 bees. So now you're going to count the number of mites that have dropped through, and you're going to divide that by 3 to give you the mite load as a percentage. So for example, if you had 10 mites in your sample, so if for 300 bees, we'll assume, so that's going to be about a 3% mite load. And depending on what your mite load is and the time of the year it is, that's going to dictate what you will do next. So, so to treat or treat, that is, or not treat, that's a question. And so I always find it funny, especially new beekeepers will ask somebody that's been beekeeping for a long time, and they're like, so, what should I do if I have, a high mite count? And it's like, well, it depends. And it really does depend right now on so many things. So it's going to depend on, the phase. So do you have a population increase? So this would be like the springtime. Do you have a peak population like what you would have in like the May, June timeframe, or what we're in right now? Do you have a population decrease? And so these numbers, when they published them, they were, everybody was typically, it's like, as long as your threshold's less than 3%, then you should be fine. But right now, they're actually saying, if you're if your numbers are greater than 1%, so that would be 3 mites. If you have more than 3 mites in that sample, then you should treat. And the reason for that, what the inspectors are finding is that the devastation that the varroa mites are doing to colonies is way more than what people imagined. And so we really got to get those mites knocked down sooner than later. So I've said all this and still haven't said anything about IPM or integrated pest management. So now let's go to integrated pest management, because there are people that don't want to treat their colonies. There are people that say, well, I want to be a treatment-free beekeeper, and that's perfectly fine. But I still would encourage you to perform mite checks on a routine basis or regular basis. So some of the methods that you can use to that have come about to try to help minimize the varroa mite infestation in colonies. They came out with screen bottom boards. I don't really know if this is necessarily a way to control the varroa mites. I mean, I think the thought is that they'll fall through to the ground. But for some people, that they like to use they like to get a mite drop. So after treatment, they could see how many mites are falling within a 24 or 48 hour period. And so you could do that with the screen bottom board in that plastic insert. There's also a really popular method for using IPM is a brood break. And so a lot of times when bees will swarm in the spring, it provides a natural brood break. Or if you split a colony, it provides a natural brood break. So that's another way that the bees will help regulate the varroa mite threshold. Then you could also do the drone comb removal. So the drone comb removal is that green comb frame that you would put into your colony. And so once the bees have it capped, then you would pull it out, either feed the frame to your chickens, or you could put it in the freezer, and then after a couple of days, then you can pull it out, put it back in the colony, everything in its stead, and the bees will clean it up, and they'll put more drone brood in there. So this is a kind of a decision tree that I found. This from Cornell University. And so their decision tree that they came up with, so obviously at the very top of the list is implement genetic controls. And so what this means is, if you have the opportunity to get some sort of like VSH queen, Russian queen, etc., then that's going to help to minimize the varroa numbers. You could also, and obviously we still want to monitor our varroa numbers. So this is something that, again, just because you want to be treatment free or anything else doesn't mean you should not or don't have to test. So if you're looking at the monitoring outcomes, so if it's below your threshold, then you could do things like, if you want to help prevent varroa, you can use these cultural methods like break the brood cycle, for example, would be a good way to use a cultural method to reduce varroa. And so this is either going to happen naturally through swarming, or you can split the colony. Another method that Jennifer Berry out of Georgia likes to do is to cage the queen, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, or you can requeen the colony. So if you requeen the colony, or if you let the colony requeen itself, there is a brood break that will naturally occur, and they will, again, that number of varroa should hopefully go down. If your monitoring outcome is above the threshold, this is typically where you may have to step in and do a little bit more to try to get rid of the varroa. So you could try using like an essential oil based treatment, chemical treatment, or you can use a synthetic type treatment. But again, monitoring to make sure that you've actually knocked the varroa down is important, because it doesn't matter, you know, we're well past the days where you could treat a colony a couple of times a year with a specific treatment plan and assume that it works, because many times those treatments don't work, and you'll still have a very high varroa count. So you've got to do something else to combat the varroa mites at that point. So anyway, let's look at this a little bit more. So some of the genetics that we can implement. So if we look at this pyramid of IPM practices, the base of this is our getting bees that have good genetics. And this is something, if we could, and Lori Hawkins, this is like her dream. If we could all have queens that have good genetics, good VSH queens, then, you know, we might actually start, you know, turning some things around in Chatham County. So that was always, that's always Lori's desire for us to be able to do that. Pat Weisbrot also always like to set colonies up with clients in certain locations to try to get better genetics. So you have your VSH line, you have the Minnesota hygienics, you have Russian bees, you have Poline. There are a lot of different varroa sensitive type bees that are out there. Then obviously monitoring. So again, we want to monitor on a monthly basis at least. Now, Rebecca likes to monitor every couple of weeks, and which is great because, you know, she's got a very nice, and if you chart things correctly or keep good records, then you can, you have those smaller increments where you can see a rise or fall in the number of varroa. But at least on a monthly basis between April and October, you want to check the varroa load in your colony. Some of the cultural breaks that we talked about. So again, brood breaks, splitting or requeening, these are all things that will help to minimize the varroa load in your colony. And then finally, you have your either essential oil based chemical treatments or your synthetic chemical treatments. And they both have their time and place. Again, this is something that you as a beekeeper will decide if this is a route you want to go in. But let's look at the different type of honeybee breeds. And so I'm sure that probably most of you have seen this type of chart. And so what I want to point out here is there are, if we, you know, I've blocked out the type of queen or breed at the top. And if you just look at the information down below, so, you know, this is a varroa talk, so we want to look for varroa resistance. So I can see that here on the very left-hand column, this type of bee has a very high resistance to varroa, and the rest of these are kind of, you know, 3s, 4s, and this one over here on the end is a 5. So the rest of these are okay, but they're not very varroa resistant, right? But there are other things that we want out of our honeybees. So we also want honeybees that don't really swarm a lot. So if you look at this, you have this first column again. This one swarms a lot. The rest of them, the one down here on the right, far right, it swarms quite a bit too, but not as much as the first column. And the rest of them, you have some 2s and 5s. So those are pretty good. And then you want also to look at, you know, your honey collection and honey storage. Well, they all collect the same. They're all tins, so they're bees and they do what bees do. So they all collect it. But if you look at the storage, this first column they don't store honey very well, but the rest of them do. So all the ones really kind of in the middle do a really good job of storing honey. And then the last one that I want to look at is defensive behavior, because nobody likes keeping mean bees. Well, this first column again is a 10. So they So they have really good varroa resistance, but they're very defensive. The rest of these are like ones, so that these are the ones I want. I want bees that aren't attacking me whenever I go outside to mow or water the flower bed or something. So if you look at the where we're at, I'm sure that most of you have realized that the first column is the Africanized honeybee. And so these are the ones where you hear reports of in the Southwest where somebody's mowing and there's a colony of Africanized honeybees that are living in the siding of a house or whatever, and they just go ballistic. So those we don't want, and those we don't. They work very closely in North Carolina to make sure that that there are no Africanized honeybee colonies in the state. Then on the far right, so these bees weren't too bad. They're a little bit more defensive, but these are the Russian honeybees, and so their varroa resistance is about a 5, and so the rest of their numbers are pretty good. But then here we have the Italian, and the Italian it's not very defensive. It stores honey really well. But its varroa resistance isn't all that great. So this is again just kind of an overview of what choosing the right bee for your apiary. So when we look at the different type of chemical treatments, so we have the essential oil-based treatments, and that's going to be like Apiguard or the Apolifar. Then you have your organic acids. So this is going to be Formic Pro, your Apibioxyl, which is the registered product of oxalic acid. There's also a HopGuard product, and then your synthetic treatments are going to be like Apivar, Apistan. So if you have not done this, there is on the Honeybee Health Coalition website, there is the varroa treatment decision tool. And so if you go to this tool, it will, depending on whether you're at a population increase, population peak, population decrease, it will, or if you have honey supers on, it will walk you through what treatment you can use, and it gives you a little thermometer indicator for some of these. So anything that has a little thermometer on it is going to be temperature sensitive. So if you put those on when it's too hot, then you can kill your colonies. If you put it on when it's too cold, then it may not actually be effective because it's not doing the job that it needs to do. So you have to be aware of your temperature, especially with like Formic Pro. If you put it on when it's too hot, it's gonna kill bees. It could possibly even kill the queen. Also, as I stated before, use tested or scientifically validated methods for your area. There are a lot of, there was a lot of talk a few years ago about the oxalic acid shop towel method. And, again, Randy Oliver and Jennifer Berry did some research on this together. And this method actually works pretty well in the Southwest, where it's very dry, and but it did not work well at all in the Southeast because the humidity takes the humidity in the air minimizes the effectiveness of that application. So just follow people that are somewhat trustworthy. Don't just go to YouTube and you got some guy on there saying that he does whatever to take care of varroa. Finally, ask your apiary inspector if you're not sure about a method. Call them. Nancy Rupert is our apiary inspector, and I mean, she's such a great resource. And all of the I will say that all the inspectors, they want to help us minimize or knock down the varroa mites. And they're not going to steer you wrong. They're going to provide you with information that's reliable and information that they see as being effective, and not, something that's I don't think they'd be mean about it, and they would say anything bad, but they're gonna steer you in the right direction. So one of the things that several of us did in Chatham County was we got these thermal treatments, these Mighty Mite thermal treatments for our colonies, because again, everybody wants bees that don't need to be treated, or they want to have bees that you don't have to use a chemical treatment for. And so these units are fairly expensive. And so the theory behind it is that you get the temperature inside the colony in the brood boxes up to 106 degrees for 2.5 hours. Some of the downsides to this is it can take anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes to get that up to temperature. You can only do this when the outside temperature is at least 70 degrees. And the thought is, and they've been using these in Europe since the 80s, the thought is that because of the temperature increase, you're going to kill the mites under the cap brood. So that's kind of the thought to this. Well, as David Jones told me or wrote me the other day, again, Randy Oliver has done quite a bit of research, and he actually collaborated with with a few beekeepers that have these thermal treatment devices. And so when you look at the temperature tolerances of your varroa mites and the honeybees, there's a range which honeybees, it's too hot. And so you kind of have to get in the sweet spot where the varroa mites are affected, but it doesn't affect either the honeybees that are under the cap brood, or the bees that are walking around. So it's the range that they have right now or they have it set at, is 106 degrees. And so that should stress and kill the mites without having any effect on the honeybee. If you look at the mortality of the mites for longer durations, so again, the Mighty Mite thermal treatment, it's set for 2.5 hours, so that should be enough time to kill the mites under the cap brood. If you let it go for a much longer time, then it would have a greater effect on the mites in the cap brood. But again, anything longer than a few hours is going to start having an effect on the cap brood as well. And so now you have a brood mortality. So at 3 hours at 42 degrees Celsius, then you're going to start having a much higher death rate, I guess, mortality rate of the bees, or the mites that are under the cap cells. But anyway, so Randy Oliver's done a lot of research on this, and basically what his finding was on this is it took about 4 hours to obtain an appreciable kill of the mites in the brood, and it took about 8 hours to do a 100% kill. So that's kind of the drawback of the device, is that it does take a long time to perform these cycles where it will kill enough mites. But he's got a couple of pages on his website devoted to this. So it's good information to go in there and look at. And I think that, David Jones and I were kind of going back and forth in email, and what he's found, Randy Oliver's found, is kind of what we have found as well using the device. And and that is sometimes it works good and sometimes it doesn't. But this goes back to the beginning statement of you have to test. You can't assume that any treatment that you apply is going to work 100% of the time. There's too many variables. So if you don't test for mites after you do the treatment, then you will never know if this worked. And you have to do a test before you treat. So again, you've got to test for mites before the treatment and after the treatment to see if it was effective. So this is kind of his Randy Oliver's summary for the mite treatment. And so he did. This is in a second part of this, I guess, research. But on day 0, he had, this is basically a mite drop. And so you can see that the mite numbers, after he did the treatment, the mite numbers went down. But then in most of the colonies, the mite numbers went back up. So I guess you need to look at, do I do some sort of another treatment, like 30 days after the initial or after 15. But anyway, so there's, I would encourage you to read Randy Oliver's research on this. And he's had a lot of help from the developer of the Mighty Mite thermal treatment, Lynn Williams. And so it wasn't, this wasn't anything that was out to get them. It was just it was good research. So Jennifer Berry out of Georgia, she came up with a program, a brood break program, where she would cage the queen for 14 days. And then on the 21st day, she treated with the sublimation of apiboxyl. And there's a link to the bee culture website where this was posted. But anyway, I did try this last year, and the problem I had with and some colonies tolerated this very well, and some colonies decided to supersede the queen. So I didn't have the results I would have liked from this, but I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's just, it's probably not a method that I would normally use or would be my go-to method. So again, you need to, if the threshold is still too high, if you treated and you're still having a lot of mites in your count, then you're going to need to use another method. So don't bother using the same method that you used previously because it didn't work. That's only going to stress the bees. It's only going to even make them more acclimated or get them used to the whatever that treatment method is. Now, as far as record keeping goes, I am a very probably this year I haven't done very well with the record keeping, but this is something that I always like to keep track of, and I just use like an Excel sheet. And so I monitor, what my mite counts are. So, for a specific date, and this is all information from last year. So I put, what my mite count was for a specific colony. And then it's like, what did I decide to do? Well, there's, because in the summertime, there's not a lot you can do. I use some Apivar, or, in this September, I was reading about using the one strip of formic acid over the longer period. So I tried doing that. But you never know if this treatment was effective if you don't keep good records. So anyway, keep good record, and it doesn't have to be anything as fancy as an Excel sheet. It could be something just writing it down, and where you can kind of get an overview of what's going on with your treatment plan. Right now, we're underway with the Mite-a-thon. And so this is a 2-week window where all the beekeepers can participate in submitting their data to mitecheck.com. And so what this does is it will upload the data for your county. And so it shows up real nice and pretty on this map. This was from mostly last year. So there's, well, actually this year, never mind. So you can see that nobody in Chatham County has submitted any reports yet. So anyway, it's just kind of nice to get a nice overview. If more people participate in this, and it's pretty anonymous. They're not gonna, come out and shame you and say that, somewhere in this mite count, it's like, Phil in Chatham County is a bad beekeeper because he had so many mites. It's not going to say anything like that. It's just, if I go to this website and I look at the map, it's like, I don't know what county that is, but whoever in there reported their mite counts is pretty high. And so anyway, I would encourage you to go to that website and put your results in. So in conclusion, I would highly recommend working with a group of beekeepers. So other beekeepers that come to the field day on Saturday and talk to the beekeepers there as well, because everybody has a little bit different idea of what we should use, what we should and how we should treat, when we should treat. So try to get some if you can get in a small group like what we do with the 4Cs, and try the same method. So if you all try using Apivar, for example, in different apiaries, does that method work across all the different apiaries? If it doesn't, for all of you work the same, then what does work? So this is a great way to kind of test different ideas. So again, join us at the field day, and we do varroa tests typically just about all the field days because it is so important. So if you haven't done a varroa count yet, then join us this Saturday and learn how to do that. We want to safely eliminate varroa mites without harming the honeybees. So a lot of these videos you see on YouTube, some of the stuff that people do, it's like, what are you doing? I mean, yeah, you probably got rid of the varroa mite, but how many honeybees did you kill while you did this? So anyway, we want to safely eliminate the varroa without harming the honeybees. I have no problem with treatment-free beekeeping. I know that there's a lot of other methods out there to naturally minimize the varroa mite counts, but it doesn't mean that you get a pass on performing mite counts. You still have to do that, and then you have to take appropriate action to do that, to minimize that. And then obviously, keep learning. Read your Bee Culture magazine, your American Bee Journal. There are different podcasts that are available that go over varroa mite. And I know that like at the state meetings and whatnot, it seems like there's an overload of presentations and speakers talking about varroa. And I'm sure that new beekeepers kind of it's like, oh great, another presentation on varroa mites. But the reason why it's talked about so much is because it is so important. If you don't get a handle on these, it will wipe out your colonies. And the funniest thing, not funny, the saddest thing I hear, especially in the winter or spring, it's like, these new beekeepers, like, I had bees, they were healthy, they had plenty of food going into winter, and then they just died. And again, the first question that's normally asked is, what was your mite count? And you're not going to see varroa mites on a honeybee. You're going to have to do a mite check to actually get a hold of that information reliably. All right, so let me stop sharing. Let's see. Rebecca had a question about caging the queen. What device do you use? So there is, I don't know if they sell them at Country Farm and Home, but there is it's called a queen introduction cage. And so I know they sell them at Bees Needs, but basically it's it has like a little square area where you can actually insert a the queen cage when you're actually wanting to introduce a new queen. But what I did is I got some of these cages and I just put super glue, or not hot glue, in that hole. And so what I'll do is I took the queen and a few attendants and put them in that that introduction cage. And like I said, that cage worked quite well. The only problem is that probably half the colonies that I did this on, the bees superseded that queen. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure it's a method I would probably use in the future. Are there any other questions?
Thanks for that, Phil. The reason that I had asked that was because we had tried 3 different methods, and we tried the queen introduction cage, we tried the push-in wire cages, which the bees fairly promptly chewed the comb around and then let the queen out, which thwarted our efforts at a brood break. And then we also tried our barrette catcher, and I was wondering if anybody is also using their barrette, because what we at least theoretically liked about that was that the bees, the workers, can go in and out and touch the queen and then track her pheromone around, hopefully staving off the superseding. But then of course the queen is stuck. But we weren't sure if anybody else was doing that, or what sort of the rest of the group is using for caging a queen.
I've used the queen cage that Phil was talking about. I had good success, but I had the same problem. They superseded. But yeah, the clip might work well. That's what I was just noticing how you were saying how they can travel throughout the hive with the pheromone net. Did you have any problem supersedure with that?
Neither one of ours superseded. So both of the times that we tried to use the push-in cage, they let her out. One very promptly, and the other one after at some point after a week. And then both the push-in cage the queen introduction cage and the barrette so far seem to be fine. When we went in and actually released her, there was no evidence of them trying to supersede her at that point.
Yeah, so this is what I used, Rebecca. This is kind of what it looks like. So it's got this little square where you could put in a regular queen, like a new queen. And so she'll walk into this area, and so she has a pretty good area that she can walk around in. And it's got a little metal tab at the top to cover the I guess the main entry exit hole. But the little hole that's down here in this little block of wood, I just put hot glue in to prevent them from chewing through it.
Phil, I was going to ask, you were talking about the Mitathon. What was that website again?
The what?
The Mitathon that's going on right now, where we can enter our mite count.
Oh, yeah. Let me go back here. So that is, it's called Mitathon. So if you go to pollinator.org /Mitathon, that's where you will find this. And then down here, once you scroll down to the bottom, you just go to in here and say submit your data. And then say, there's a little tab here, say take the survey. And so you could put, you have to put your email in, everything else is optional, but you would put your, like your zip code or whatever. use, what mite testing method did you use, alcohol wash or powdered sugar, and then how many hives you have in your apiary. And then, so it asks you a bunch of questions. And then for your mite count, so if I had 3 colonies, for example, so, let's say colony 1 had 3 mites, the other one had 6, and the other one had, let's say 22. So you would just put, what methods of treatment you've used in the past, what are you thinking about using in the past, and then you just say submit the survey. And so then that information will show up on the map, the survey results. And then if I scroll down, so you get it for the US. If I zoom in, I can scroll over that way. And so now you can see if you hover over like the county, so like Guilford has that whoever put this in, there was basically the average was 3 mites. Some of these like Greenville was 6. Let's see. Some of these other counties up here, like, whatever, Michigan, so Virginia Beach, 14. So it gives you the averages. It just kind of gives you a glimpse of what what's going on as far as an average of the US. But it doesn't take long. It takes like probably 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, if you have 50 colonies, then that may take a little bit longer, but it doesn't take probably 5 minutes to fill all this out.
Hey, Phil, I met Jennifer Berry I went to her farm about probably 8 or 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason she did not like the chemicals that they were using in the United States at the time to treat varroa mites. And that's why she come up with that process of removing the queen for 14 days.
Yep.
Because she told me the good stuff to treat the varroa mites was in Europe and they wouldn't allow it in the United States yet.
Oh, okay. Doesn't surprise me.
But she believes in a strong queen, good DNA.
Yeah, and that's really, going back to the very beginning. If you look at that flow chart, the IPM flow chart, the genetics is the number one thing. And I know, like, for example, Corey and Daniel have they raise bees and whatnot, and they raise their own queens. So if you have an operation like that where you can really, as you monitor the queen health, all the factors that a queen breeder looks for, then you can get rid of the queens that are, that the bees aren't producing any honey, or they have high mite counts and whatnot. I will say that, as far as queens go, I highly encourage people to buy local queens, and there is a big push to do that in North Carolina is to look at local queen breeders, because they're acclimated to our area. You're not bringing something in from California or Hawaii, which I'm not saying anything bad about their queens, but we have really great people raising queens in North Carolina, and I like shopping local and supporting local people. I like it when people buy local honey. So I support my local beekeepers as well. Has anybody done any counts recently?
Did you ask about mite counts?
Yeah.
Well, you already called me out. So ours have sort of been all over the place. And interestingly, we had one that had a brood break. And so they were actually in the process of trying to raise their own queen. And so we went ahead and pulled out the old queen and let them go ahead. And so what actually ended up happening was we gave them, I think, 5 weeks of a grace period where we didn't do counts. And when we counted last Saturday, it was 47 out of 300 after a brood break.
Wow.
So that queen is now caged, and in 3 weeks, we will let her out and throw oxalic at it. So,
Yeah.
but really our other colonies have been all over the place. I mean, I feel like most of the ones that have started out this year as new colonies, one swarm that we call it, and then one swarm that I call it was somebody's queen because she came marked, but we caught them in a swarm trap at my parents' farm off of 87. They actually had really low counts, whereas some of our more established one had higher ones.
Okay. I had a lot of swarms this spring, so I had plenty of brood breaks.
Hey, Phil, this is Lori. I've
Lori?
done some, thank you for that little plug about my dream.
I know.
Lori
has a dream.
I have a dream. Let's get these bees to take care of this problem.
Right.
But a few of us, and Phil included, have been ordering the varroa sensitive hygienic queens, and we're having some mixed results with that. So, you know, the thought is you buy them from a breeder, and they have these souped up queens that are artificially inseminated to carry that genetics, but then of course, when they go out to mate, if they don't have the drones that have those genetics, then you may not get a real good result, which is, I think, among our group that we kind of keep in contact with, we're having like a 50-50 good response to our mite counts, which is really interesting. And I recently just did test one of my VSH high dollar queens and found 15 per 300, which was really disappointing. I'll go ahead and treat her, but I'm not going to keep those genetics in the hive. So it's a little bit late for me to think about requeening because it's so hard to find queens this time of year. Most of the breeders have sold out, but yeah, you gotta, like you said, Phil, you don't check, you won't know. And if your colony dies out, you won't know, was it from varroa or not? And so that's where I'm at. I would say 2/3 of my colonies are below threshold right now, which I'm really encouraged because I have been trying to keep the genetics in there. So maybe slowly but surely, at least our area, we can get some varroa hygienic dominant genes out there. So that's where I'm at anyway.
Yep. Lori, I think your rooster needs a cough drop.
Can you all hear that? He's a young rooster.
Oh, okay. He's in puberty. Okay.
Yeah, he is. He thinks he's hot stuff, though.
Phil, I've tested most of my hives recently, and I have out of 12 hives, 8 of them were below threshold. Actually, 10 of them were below threshold. The highest number I've had this year is 15 mites.
Oh wow, that's a lot, but it's not.
Yeah, most of them have been.
It's not Rebecca's numbers.
And that's 1 or 2 per sample, not 1 or 2 per 100.
Okay.
So I've been real pleased with my my swarm catching local bee method.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Now, David, I know that you had talked about the small cell foundation as well.
Yep.
And so what was your, what's been your experience with that so far?
Well, it's still inconclusive, but I mean, I've got a couple of hives that are now small. All the comb is small cell, and I have not had to treat them. I've got a couple more that I have had to treat. But the idea behind it is that with small cell, the bees actually mature a little quicker. So drones, instead of, 21 days, it's like 19 days.
Okay.
And workers, instead of, I can't even remember now, drones is 24. Instead of 24, it's 21, and workers about 1 day.
Okay.
less. So that shorter time in the sealed cell does not allow as many female mites to develop. That's the thought behind small
Theory
cell.
behind it.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
So I'm going to keep trying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I found was that if I got a half a cup of bees from a small cell hive, it was way more than 300 bees. I did a sample the other day, and I counted 9 mites, and I thought, oh no. And then I counted the bees, and there were 512 bees in the cell.
Wow.
And it was a half a cup.
Hmm.
And they are small bees.
Okay. Awesome. Are there any other questions? Again, I can't stress enough, if you have the opportunity to join us on Saturday morning at 9 at the Four Cs, highly encourage everybody to join us.
Bill, I want to thank you for the presentation. I thought it was very interesting and educational.
Good.
Thank you, Phil.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Y'all have a good night.
This is Myra. I want to make a pitch to please check out the State Fair Sign Up Genius. We're going to need your honey. We're going to need wax. We're going to need lots of stuff. So help us out.
Yeah, you bet, Myra. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Have a safe trip back, Phil.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Bye.